one member participating remotely, so we'll be doing votes by roll call this evening. I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda except for one new business item. We have a surrender of a liquor license for After House that was unanticipated and needed to be added. And then I will move to announcements.
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and we have a sewer force main project update from our sewer director, David.
And good evening, everyone. The project's moving along slowly, as one resident sees every single day. We are starting work on C Street. They are down there prepping everything, moving a couple of things out of the way. There's a fence and property across the street and number 15 North Water Street that's within the right of way, so we have to move it out of the way to do all the work. And this street's going to be probably one of the more challenging ones, just because there's a lot in C Street, as well as an active force main and everything else like that. So it's going to be slow. It continues slow. Center Street was completed and paved. C Street has been, Step Lane has been completed and paved, temporary pavement for now, sidewalks, etc. And it's going okay. They're starting back down on South Shore, coming up towards Surfside, and then they'll be taking a left onto Surfside. So it is moving along. It's painfully slow, but it's getting there. So nothing found yet that we didn't want to find, put it that way.
And what'll happen? They'll take the tar off the sidewalks and redo the sidewalks at
Yeah,
some point. Yeah.
Yep, that's all. We did that to try to keep everything in place, the
That's
soils and
okay.
everything. And they'll bring in a special crew to take and reset the curbing and the sidewalks, and especially when we get down on Lily Street, there's a lot of the old flagstone and stone, so that's going to all be done by a specialty crew. So,
And are they going to put a base under there so that when cars drive on it, it doesn't?
that's the
Get
plan.
rolling again.
However, we've been asked to install it the way it was 150 years ago, but it just doesn't work anymore. So it's as with the curbing, the curbing's going to be put back as is and where it was. So everything's been numbered and listed, and so it's a challenging project. We knew it was going to be challenging, and we're just moving along. So
What's that? I mean, my house is shaking right now, but I must say the crew is quite friendly, and I've asked 2 or 3 times, is everything okay? How can I help you?
we're extremely lucky to have the contractors and the engineering firms on staff that we do. It is disruptive. However, they're trying not to they don't start too early, and then they try to get everything in and out of the way and get out of there by a close enough time in the afternoon. So, but with the rain hasn't helped much. I mean, over 2 inches of rain the other day, and we got another inch coming, I guess, tomorrow. So a lot of groundwater they're having to deal with, but all part of it. Oh yeah, we've been talking about in the meeting we had today of trying to do another public outreach, especially going forward when we get on towards Lily Street. We know most of the residents are gone. However, there's still probably a good handful or so of residents. We're going to try to call for another public forum type thing. We're going to be, and we're also going to have it as a hybrid. It's going to be semi for Zoom and then in person. So to try to reach out to everybody. And the last one was fairly well attended up at the church. So just going to let everyone know what's going on. So that's it for that. So thank you.
Thanks very much, David. That these step updates are really helpful. Just a quick aside. I'm sorry if you said this, but when will Center Street be open? It is open now. Okay, thank you. I have one item that isn't on the agenda because it just came up today, but I think you've all known a little bit about it. There's a very large elm tree on Easton Street near Nantucket Hotel. It is in poor condition, causing potential public safety hazards, and it will be starting to get removed by the DPW early next week. It is going to be, again, a very disruptive process. It's a very, very large tree, and it's going to cause the road to be blocked, parking will have to be no parking in the immediate area for a period of time. And DPW will be visiting the local residents and businesses to let them know what the time frame is looking like. But please be prepared for that. That's it for announcements.
Are there any select board reports or comments?
Just one, I just wanted to follow up. Last 2 or 3 meetings ago, we talked about the HDC and their committees and working groups. We talked about it, Matt and I, last week, wondering about to get it on the agenda for the board soon, because there's a lot of different opinions as to what the HDC can do. They can deputize people on the staff to do more work. They can appoint their own committees and so forth. I just don't want that to slip and pass by. Do we have plans for it soon?
We discussed it today. And the HDC has actually requested for the chairs to meet with the HDC, NPDC, and select board. And we are trying to organize that meeting for sometime before the end of the month and then get it on a early February agenda.
Thank you.
Brooke?
I'm pleased to announce that the Department of Housing and Community Development in Boston has issued another period of certified another period of safe harbor for us under Chapter 40B for 2 years until December 11th, 2024. And this is the result of 48 rental units at Richmond Great Point Development and 2 home ownership units in the Sandpiper Place portion of that development. And so that's part of what we call the Violet Place Acceleration Program that the Affordable Housing Trust orchestrated along with the support of this board. And 8 of those units, rental units, actually have certificates of occupancy, and tenants will be moving in soon. And the remaining units are in process of construction, and you'll see those coming online and boxes being delivered and construction happening over the next several months. So that really is an acceleration. It's moved extremely fast, and we're getting folks into housing, which is very exciting, and also have another 2 years of safe harbor under 40B. So congratulations to the housing office for all the work Tucker and Haley and Ken did to make that happen, and Attorney Marsh as well. Thanks.
Excellent. I don't believe there's any follow-up. Are there any public comments this evening for items that are not on the agenda for discussion? I'm not seeing any. New business, the after house license surrender.
Yes, thank you. We added this to new business in anticipation of the application we have later on this evening at the same location. It is expired because of the season, but we still should do a traditional surrender of the license. So we have a signed surrender from the previous licensee as well. And it also is part of our policy for transferring a common vicular for the food license.
I move to accept surrender and to transfer the common vic.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Matt Fee?
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb?
Aye.
Brooke Moore?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Next up, we have approval of minutes, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Do we want to take them all together, or is there any discussion on pending contracts?
Just one quick question on the contracts. Why so many extensions? I don't think I've seen this many extensions before.
Some of them are because we don't have the project management resources to get things completed, but a number of the ones that indicate for plus Rise Engineering, these are actually completed. However, the inspections for them, which have to be done in a specific manner, have not been completed. That's the bulk of them, I think. Some of these relate to inspections. The Murph roof is an inspection issue. And some of the work just hasn't been completed yet. There are a lot of them. I agree.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of surprised. I was wondering. Thank you.
Is anyone comfortable making a motion on all three?
Sure. I'd move approval of the minutes of January 11th, Treasury warrants and pending contracts for January
One
18th.
second, contract's fine, but I had one question about the minutes. Last week, I'd asked about student police officers, and in that section of the meeting, I don't see it listed in the minutes.
What section was that in?
We're talking about various warrants.
Can we
Is
add
it-
something?
If you want to add it, we can. We generally capture the gist of the conversation. And not a transcript. But we can certainly
I'd
add.
like it in the minutes, and I did get a note of your answer. So I understand the difference. There was a question, and I think it should be public that I asked it and I got a response.
And just so people know what the response was.
Yes, I was about to ask you what,
Yes,
to
so
make
your-
it public
your-
what the response was.
Your question was in the draft warrant of last week, there's an Article 7, which has a compensation schedule for miscellaneous employees. And there was a call firefighter and a call EMT, I think it was. And they
Yes.
were something like, I don't have it right in front
They
of
were
me, but
27 and the student police officer was 30. And I was,
yes.
I
And
was a
the,
little concerned about what a student police officer.
yes. And so the student police officer is a police officer who's provisionally hired, who would be at the police academy and actively would be becoming a full-time employee following successful completion of the academy. So their salary is based on something slightly higher than that of the highest level community service officer. And the call firefighters are at a level that is somewhat below a full-time firefighter because we didn't want them to clash.
Thank you.
So I'd amend my motion to approve the minutes with the inclusion of Malcolm's question about those things to be added.
Okay, and fine on the second. I thought Matt did. Oh,
Oh,
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor by roll call? Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye, carries unanimously. Next up, we have an application to change manager for Hatch's Package Store. Amy?
Yep, this is just a change of manager, which is required. It's not, all the requirements have been met, fingerprints and stuff like that. Their former manager left the island, so they're replacing in both of these.
Oh, you're welcome to say something, but we'll probably just make a motion.
Thank you for having me. I understand that I am the principal representative of the business and, oh, sorry, Zach Held. I understand I'm the principal representative of the business and I'm responsible for the store at all times, and my phone number will be available to any town officials for any reason. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Move approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye, carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Request for approval of application of a change of manager for the Breeze at the Nantucket Hotel.
And same situation with their manager leaving, and Carlos has been with them from the beginning, has been the assistant GM, so he's taking over as GM.
Move approval.
Second?
All those in favor by roll call, Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously. Next up, we have public hearings. The first is for the common vic and alcoholic beverage license for Ethos. This is the surrender that we just did. It is, so I will open the public hearing.
Thank you. And this is for the location at 18 Broad Street, as we discussed previously, was known as After House, to be known right now is Ethos Nantucket. One thing I want to mention at the top of this, in the public notice, originally, one of the partners, Lauren Schadt, also known as Gracie, who's on the call as well, is not the manager that was listed as the manager. Now the liquor license manager will be Emily Dusseau, also on this call as well. So I just wanted to make that note there as well. And they will be part of this license, both, and Emily will be the manager. So they are requesting a common vicular with an all alcoholic beverages liquor license and a non-live, entertainment application. The one change here from the previous two establishments that have been at this location since 2014, I think it's been a restaurant of some kind. Both of those were wine and malt beverages. This request is for an all alcoholic beverages liquor license. So that would be the difference there as well. So there's considerations here. The common vicular portion of this license that we just approved the transfer for covers the food preparation and service portion of the license. Liquor, as we know, as we go through this, you have the 5 areas of consideration where there to be any reason to deny a license. They have to be based on the appropriateness of the liquor license at a location. Again, this has had a liquor license since 2014. The number of existing dispensaries in town. Obviously, this is downtown where the majority of licenses are. We've had no comments received about this application. It's an existing location, so traffic, noise, and size doesn't apply, and the sort of operation that carries the license and reputation of the applicant. The applicant, Emily, who will be the manager, Gracie and Zach, who are on this call as well, I met with prior to submitting this application. They have been in the restaurant business on Nantucket, have run a wine consulting company the past few summers. They're very enthusiastic, very good to work with. So they have a great attitude. We went over all the different possibilities of this location and they're very excited about it. So, and they've been obviously very organized and very responsive. So I wanted to give them a highlight on that as well. I don't think there's anything else. I think that's the basic summary from me. So if they have anything you like to ask questions, they are all on Zoom with us.
Does the board have any questions? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this application? If not, can we close the public hearing?
Motion close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Matt Fee,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously.
May I make an additional comment? I wanted to bring up, part of their application does mention, I've talked to this about them, if they would be interested in having sidewalk seating, as that location did have it during the pandemic. What I want to say on that is I'm going to request a hearing in February for all of you to review that policy and decide if we're going to move forward with that. I've met with HDC. I met with Holly recently, so we kind of went over what that plan was for HDC to review the look of it and all of that, because it expires our ability to approve it locally April 1st. I don't think they're going to keep extending it. So all the licensees have to make it a permanent part of their license. Okay. So I'd like to handle that as a group altogether. So tonight we're reviewing the application for the establishment alone indoors. I will include them, should that go through, in February. When we review it, if you approve it to move forward as a permanent process in March, everyone can apply to have it as a permanent part of their license, if that makes sense to everyone.
So should that be part of the motion?
The motion, yes, I think, but the signature form, I only included the interior space as the licensed premise.
Okay.
So we can just say that the interior space of 18 Broad Street is part of the licensed premise.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
Do you want me to give it a whirl? So a motion to approve the issuance of a seasonal common victual license with all alcoholic beverages restaurant license for Ethos Nantucket for 18 Broad Street for the interior premises only, and a determination that this is not detrimental to the spiritual activities of a church.
Perfect. Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call, Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye, carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you all for showing up. Good luck.
One
Thank you
more.
so much.
Oh, sorry, we have another one. For the entertainment license. I will open the public hearing.
So we just to add on to this, requesting a non-live entertainment license, which is background music and streaming, and conditions with that I'll put on licenses now that it's for the interior premises only. No exterior speakers or sound, is for background music only.
Okay. Are there any questions?
And that was
Matt?
the same. It was the same as before.
Correct.
So I'll move approval.
Second.
Oh, so-
First, we have to close
Oh,
the
we gotta
public
close
hearing.
that first.
But,
Sorry.
but before, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none.
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
once again, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Congratulations.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Town managers report.
Thank you. First, we have proposed fiscal 2024 enterprise fund budget reviews. And we were going to do water first, but the director of the water company has been detained for a water main break down at Commercial Wharf. So we're going to go with the sewer director first. David?
Evening again, everyone. Thank you. Our mission statement and our story has pretty much stayed the same as to protecting the public health and environment for our community for any high quality wastewater collection and treatment services. That hasn't changed at all. Go into our goals, continue to meet state mandated discharge limits for treated effluent. Goal 2 is to continue on with the CMOM program, which has been moving along very well over the last few years. We have done quite a bit. We're still continuing to move forward. We're going to be starting some stuff out in Sconset and Vestal Street. So that program is continuing to move ahead. We are still moving forward with the CWNP and the sewer master plan. And that's occasionally can be a bit of just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together in the right spots, but everything seems to be going as planned. Some of our other goals is to complete current sewer projects that we have going on. The Surfside area sewer project is just about complete. We have conducted all of our testing for everything. All of the mains, the pump station has been turned on and tested. There's a few more connections that you're going to be seeing them do here in the next probably month or so. That entails work in the bike path and in my Comet Ave to divert all the flows to the new pump station. I did have Libby there one day, and the pump station is the most advanced and most up-to-date station that we have. And it's well laid out, and they're going to be there for many, many years to go. One of the other things that we're working on now, and it started this week, is the Children's Beach watershed for the stormwater assessment. You'll notice a bunch of national water main trucks in the area, North Beach Street, up on the cliff area, Easton. We're doing the exact same thing that we did with the sewers over the years, with cleaning and CCTV and everything that's in the ground or not in the ground or went through someone's house or whatever like that. So we started that program to move that forward for the major assessment that really needs to be done. One of the other goals is the transfer of all stormwater operations will be coming over to from the DPW to the sewer department. We've pretty much started that already. We've initiated some projects, done some work on our own. We do have the ability to take and handle some of that work, which has been good. I'm very lucky with my crew. Still moving forward with our training to keep some of the most qualified staff that we could ask for. We just had another operator just pass a bunch of his hoisted license. We have another young man that just started recently who's getting ready to take his grade 4. So that training is continuing on island most of the time. It's easier to bring instructors over for a week at a time than it is to send people off. Like I said, the Surfside project is just about done. They're now getting out on the C Street, like I reported earlier. The gravity sewer on South Shore Road has been completed and tested. We have a few more stubs to run across to the west side of the street, but all in all, that project has been completed, less the pump station. This is a dry sewer at the moment. The pump station will come at a little bit later date. Design and everything is already in process for that, but this is mainly for future upcoming either developments or expansions going forward. One of the other items that we have coming up this year at town meeting will be we're going to take an initial setup of an enterprise fund for stormwater so that it will be able to ultimately have its own set of regulations, permitting, revenue stream, et cetera, to be able to move forward projects and repairs that are needed. That pretty much touches all the initiatives and the goals. A bunch of pictures of the crew doing their thing. Our permitting has still advanced. We're doing, like I said, 16 to 25 permits weekly. We haven't even seen a slowdown yet at all on that. We're working an awful lot with Tucker and Richmond and doing all of the waivers that have been approved and on the AMI properties and stuff like that. So that's been an ongoing process since we had a meeting here a few weeks ago. Quite challenging to get everything to line up, but it's coming along. But Tucker's been a great that, and my staff, we put in countless hours on all of that, so we're moving ahead. So to get into the numbers, I don't know if you want me to just touch on the exceptions to keep it shorter.
Just exceptions.
Okay.
Please.
Moving forward on the exceptions, I did have a few increase requests, mainly just in utilities. As we've seen quite a jump in utilities and in certain supplies and stuff like that. So it was an $83,000 increase in electricity, $16,000 for fuel oil. Vehicle maintenance and repairs is just you can't get anything for one thing for 6-8 months, and then it costs you 4 times of what it used to cost a year ago. So same thing with our maintenance and equipment. Again, lead times now, we just found out another lead time today was 36 months we need a piece of pipe for one of the projects. It's unreal, and what we're struggling for, myself and Mark and everyone else like that, is just trying to get materials is unbelievable. Gas and diesel increase about $14,300. Supplies and pipes, again, that's usually a pretty hefty line item, but we're trying to do a lot of the work in-house and stuff like that. Chemicals I've explained before in the past, and with help from Matt connected me with some different vendors and suppliers. Getting stuff like citric acid has been quite a challenge. It seems like we might be over the curve a little bit on that, but everything is just the prices are just gone through the roof. And again, electricity increased for the collection systems because of the pump stations, and the fuel oil again for the Sconset facility. Capital items, we continue on with the CMOM, which has been extremely successful as we've gone forward. Phase 2 design and construction for supplemental funding of $7 million for the upgrades for phase 2 for the treatment facility, which continues to evolve from being able to dump vac trucks that are cleaning either catch basins or sewers because of any contaminants. We have to have a special treatment process for that. Potentially have to have a special treatment process for PFAS going forward. So it's evolving as we go, and trying to be able to fit everything in place has been a bit of a challenge, but this is for the supplemental funding to move that forward, and replacement of a few vehicles. Again, if you order a vehicle now, it's anywhere from 18 months to 24 months to get a vehicle. So it's, you got to try to get something ordered, and then by the time you get it, the price is different from when you ordered it. So that kind of touches on the exceptions and the capital items. Shows our org chart, everyone that we have listed. I can go to questions if anyone has questions, and or I can go line by line item, but I think we'll start with questions if that works.
Brooke?
David, are you adding additional staff to manage the stormwater piece? How's that working in terms of staffing?
I will. The stormwater is, once we become an enterprise fund, that's on one of my last pages that I had to get to. We will be hiring a stormwater manager to start. The initial, what we anticipate the initial year, 2 years into it, are going to be a lot of investigative work. We need to find out what's in the ground. Our crew will be supplementing a lot of the work. We are lucky we are able to do camera work ourselves and some cleaning and whatnot. So as we can moving forward, if we have a call, we're answering all stormwater calls now. We'll send staff right out and look. I already have 7 projects in the pipeline that I met with Libby on site on a lot of them on one of our field trips that we went on. So we are moving a lot of projects that have either been stalled or just have popped up recently. So a lot of stuff's moving along. It might stretch our resources a little bit to start, but it's like the sewer department when we started. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve and then a growing. We still feel growing pains now in the sewer department, but it's. But I'm lucky. I have a pretty good staff. So
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, David. Mark, now that you're here, we can do the water department.
Sorry, good to see you guys. We got a water main breakdown on Commercial Wharf, so I'll try to be quick for you.
Just takes a minute to online.
You can go right to the goals. The mission stays the same. Some of the goals that we have are to work hand in hand with David and sewer as that capital project, the sewer force main, goes through town. We're going to be replacing water main as we need. So even today, David and I talked about C Street itself. They have to move that water main. We don't have to replace it. It was put in 1992, but we're going to be hand in hand in that whole project. So one of the goals is to maintain that relationship, and everywhere we go, we're going to go together. Goal 2 is a more recent goal. We've been having some technical problems with our meter reading equipment in the water towers. One of them is old enough now to where it's not accepting any upgrades, which means we have to go out and hand read some meters that aren't getting read. We don't want that. That's poor customer service. We want to be able to give them instant real-time data. Reading it, there's too big a gap. So we've got that stuff ordered. We're gonna make sure that's all back online. We want to complete the construction of a new water supply well that we've talked about with you guys plenty of times up at North Pasture. That'll be a complete backup. We don't have redundancy in the summertime. Every pump runs 24 hours a day. So this will be a redundancy well if needed. And of course, the solar project that's been going on for a couple of years now, we're hoping to move forward with that and actually get that underway in the upcoming year. The initiatives associated with those goals are similar to what I said. A good example of where the sewer force main is going is Lily Street. For us, that was on our list of pipes to change. It's very old. It's in bad shape. Luckily, David's sewer force main is going up that road, and we're gonna replace that. Again, the computers and the equipment, and get the plans going after the well's complete. We did just get a letter from Mass DEP approving our pump test for the new well, rated for 1,000 gallons a minute. So if we can pump test that well and it comes out, hopefully by the end of 24, we will have a new well online and then start construction of the pump station for it. But all's going well with that. We didn't have many exceptions. I don't know if you want me to go line items or just the exceptions. A few, like David, are more operating stuff. Utility propane and electric should be included with that, is up 41,000 for us. We need a new plotter and some upgrades to our office equipment that we use to plant or plot all of our drawings, and some survey equipment. And we had to add repair and maintenance, had to get bumped up. Just buying the material it costs to go fix a break on Commercial Wharf is very expensive now. Our inventory is the big one, and that's the major jump in this whole budget. That's different than almost every other year. And with the help of Brian and talking through with finance, coming up with a way to back supplement the budget with some retained earnings and go out and spend 540,000 to really stock up on our inventory. So we have everything we need, and that there isn't a slowdown, or there isn't somebody that can't have water because we don't have the pieces and parts. Capital moving forward for next year, we have a lead service replacement program that's mandated by DEP. We have about 90 lead services left. When we change out Lily Street, we're probably going to take away 15 to 20 right there. That's going to come out of retained earnings. Water tank recoating, all towers. We bid this a year ago and were sticker shocked by the price. So we had to go back and increase that to 2.2 million to touch up the tanks. I'm not talking about repainting the tanks, just touching them up. That'll be a borrowing. Employee housing, we're looking at house moves or potential modular home for out at 43 Pulpus to add another employee house. We put 2 million, that would be out of retained earnings. And then also a pipe and equipment storage building. Right now, all of our pipe that is going to show up when we get all the supplies that we're waiting on sits outside. So it'd be nice to keep that inside, and that's also out of retained earnings. So there is one borrowing for the water tank and recoating. But other than that, it's pretty status quo. We're expecting pumpage to come up a little bit. We did 197 new connections last year. So that's 197 more places to supply water to. So revenue should be good.
How does that compare to the previous few years?
We've been right around that 130, and this budget is set up for the 130. The timing of the big development on Old South Road led a lot to the 197. They come in and get 30 and 40 meters at a time when they're ready. So that kind of dictates those big jumps.
So 130 is sort of the normal.
It's been normal for the last 3 or 4
and then this
years.
is the extra.
This year we had the extra. Some other projects
Wow.
that were happening, but it was. We finally are starting to get some meters in. We were down to 30 meters. We just got another shipment, so things are starting to pick up.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Noah Carberg, Airport Manager. I believe Noah is on the phone. He's not on.
Hi, Libby. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience.
No problem, Noah. So Noah, just you can just start taking the board through what we're typically doing is starting with a quick review of departmental goals and then getting to the exceptions and then seeing if the board has any questions.
Okay. Thank you. We have a number of goals. They're very simple and they are very project oriented. Our initial goals are to complete construction of taxiway golf projects. We have a separation and standards issue for taxiway golf. We need to remove pavement from one side and move it to the other side to maintain a standard separation distance. Our second goal is to continue our PFAS investigation in compliance with the Massachusetts contingency plan. And our third goal is to begin construction on a much needed employee crew quarters project. We have additional goals to develop a design and concept for a terminal space optimization project. Loosely defined, it's a project of reallocating space that exists in the terminal and putting it to better uses. Over the last decades, we've shifted from 90% of our terminal employments being characterized by non-sterile air taxi departures, where they're now characterized by secure departures on regional airlines to major market destinations. We're developing the design for South Ramp expansion project. We find we see similar numbers of GA corporate aircraft from year to year, but those aircraft are much larger, both in length and in wingspan. And that severely impinges on our ability to safely operate our existing ramp. We would like to continue expansion of non-aeronautical revenue generation through business opportunities and lease opportunities with tenants and prospective tenants. We are completing the first private hangar built at Nantucket in, I believe, 15 or 20 years. That project is substantially complete and will be complete this spring. And we're moving forward with 2 AIP projects to complete a non-standard geometry study and the airport master plan update. Major
What is it?
initiative, we have, I'm sorry.
What is a geometry study? Are you going back to school?
It's not geometry in that sense. There are a number of non-standard conditions on the airfield that have accumulated over the last 30 to 40 years. The timing of our historical infrastructure is that much of it was built 20, 30, and even 40 years ago. And over that time frame, FAA design standards have changed. So a number of areas have fallen out of compliance. So as we're embarking on future major airfield upgrades, we're trying to inventory the full set of conditions that are non-standard so we can bring those up to existing standards as we take on the project updates that touch those geographical areas. Does that answer your question, Mr. Fee?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. For completed initiatives, we have completed taxiway echo reconstruction. This was a $20 million discretionary project fully funded by the FAA under the CARES grant, and it was the first major discretionary project at the airport in, I believe, a dozen years. Our second initiative is quality service delivery. As a reminder, the airport owns and operates the FBO. FBO is an acronym for Fixed Base Operator. It's the servicer of private aircraft at an airport. Typically at a JFK or a LaGuardia or a Denver, there are 3, 4, even 5 companies that offer this service at Nantucket. We are the FBO, and customer service is an important part of that. The third initiative, we have completed our fuel farm rehabilitation. We spent about $6 million on 2 major project aspects. It was to replace the cabinetry and piping at the fuel farm, and also to upgrade and replace the fire suppression system. We believe we are now the first fixed conversion of a PFAS-containing foam facility to a certified fluorine-free facility. And additional initiatives, we continue to implement and institute and update our rates and charges and airline leases to keep these modern and compensatory in nature. So we are fully charging and receiving income for the services we are providing. We continued non-aeronautical development in Bunker Road. We have recently issued and closed on an RFP and are evaluating those responses now. We've completed a HVAC control. We are nearing substantial completion, rather, for an HVAC control project for the terminal. And we've recently successfully carried forward legislative change to TNCs, transportation network companies, the Uber, Lyft, sidecars, et cetera, of the world, where we now have the authority to regulate and collect fees from them, similar to Massport. So we're very glad to see that having come through. Significant year-to-year changes. I have
Noah,
5.
question.
No, hang on one second. It's Brooke. Can you elaborate a little on continued non-aeronautical development? What is that?
Non-aeronautical land developments. I believe after the land bank, the airport is the largest landowner on Nantucket, and we have land that we term non-aeronautical. We don't use it for the fundamental movement and servicing of aircraft. So Bunker Road tenants, landscapers, fuel farms, boat facilities. This represents an opportunity not only for local business, but for the airport to increase its annual revenue portfolio that is not dependent on aircraft activity or passenger activity. So it's an important aspect for revenue diversification.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Significant changes year over year. We've seen a significant increase in, could be a significant change in aviation and non-aeronautical activity. We're operating, I believe at last count, we have about 170 or 180 different leases and agreements with fewer staff. We continue to see staffing availability challenges from administration all the way down our line. We have great existing staff, but they are in high demand and the market is incredibly competitive for them. So we face continued challenges. We have a number of open positions, and we are asking the people that we have to work harder, do more, as well as we try to automate as many processes we can as possible. We see a continued increased costs with our PFAS program requirements under the Massachusetts contingency plan. And we see, as we're beginning to scope major airfield improvement projects, we see severely escalating project development and inflation costs. And they're unfortunately out of sync with our budget cycle. When we originally spec'd the cost and scope of these projects, we've seen significant upcreep in these prices and estimates, and we need to adjust our capital plan accordingly. We're also seeing a lot of volatility in jet fuel, not only the uplift taken by our customers, which is increasing, The price is increasing, transportation costs are increasing and becoming more difficult, and the market is very volatile right now. We have to forecast our pricing 18 months out, which is, it's doable, but it's difficult. Couple items of continued interest. A lot of external factors are important considerations and stressors on the airport's financial performance. There remains a national pilot career pipeline, AKA the pilot shortage. It's an ongoing stress to our regional airlines from Cape Air all the way to JetBlue. In many cases, they would like to fly more flights or operate more markets to Nantucket, but they don't have the aircraft and they don't have the flight crews. And this is a fundamental threat to some of our operators and to communities, small communities that rely on air service. Airline upgauging continues. This means airlines are putting larger aircraft on routes. The era of the 50-seaters in many cases is almost over. Regional airlines are upgrading to 76, 90-seat, 100-seat aircraft, and even JetBlue is phasing out their 100-seat aircraft and moving to the Airbus A220, which should have about 140 seats. And then I mentioned the Jet A market dynamics. There is a lot happening globally and regionally that affects supply chain to Nantucket. We have a great relationship with our fuel provider, with the steamship, but it's many links in the chain. So even if one link breaks, it has an effect on Nantucket, our ability to keep the fuel pipeline going. And it takes a few days to recover from that. Regarding our revenue budget, I have a few items that I'm calling out for you. Our fiscal year 2024 budget, we are forecasting an increase in salaries and wages. It's, I believe that's threefold. Looking back to 2021 and 22 actuals, those numbers are depressed by our receipt of CARES funds. Those are reflected, I believe, as a reduction in expenses, which would explain the lower 2022 total. Those numbers, previous numbers are also actuals. We have had several unfilled positions in the budget, which we are beginning to fill. And we have been holding some positions in that budget, even though we've had recent retirements. So it's not a complete apples to apples comparison, but it is related to CARES Act. It is related to filling and maintaining positions, and it is related to recent increase in wages, which we've moved on to staff. We're holding more money for professional services. Part of this is related to litigation. Part of it is related to short staffing. We are asking more of our consultants than we have in the past. For our transfer to the general fund, I believe in the close of 2022, we had allocated an increased repayment to the town. We may consider that again this year at the discretion of our commission. For exceptions, we will be reinstating the environmental coordinator position under positions. This was actually how I originally came into the airport, so I have a soft spot for that one. But this person predominantly handles noise complaints in the summer, habitat management, wildlife management, and would oversee day-to-day PFAS activities. For our capital projects, bear with me while I navigate to that list. For fiscal year 24, there are a number of projects listed. We're seeking funding for construction of our Nobodere Farm Road Housing and Development Project. This is a project that will provide housing for 8 of our seasonal employees, as well as 1 manager's apartment that is self-contained and could be year-round. We found that our season is no longer a 3-month season. It extends into a full 6 months, and our current facility, which is unwinterized, just isn't adequate for holding staff in our shoulder seasons. Paint beads and rubber markings removal. Annually, we redo portions of the airfield markings, and that's a repeating expense. We're seeking supplemental funding for terminal improvements. This is the sort of infill reallocation of space project that I had mentioned earlier. We're noting it as AIP funding, even though potentially we might use what's known as the bill APP funding. It adheres to AIP rules and splits. The runway 24 high-speed exit taxiway is an increase to a decrease to runway occupancy time. If you're familiar with our airfield diagram, there's a large gap in available taxiway exits from Delta to the end of runway 24. By moving aircraft off the Renew high-speed taxiway, we can decrease the runway occupancy time, decrease emissions, and over the course of 60,000 enplanements in a year, this has a strong positive impact on airfield capacity as well as reducing air emissions. We're seeking supplemental funding for the south ramp expansion. We had a previous allocation, I forget what it was offhand, but we've been notified by the FAA that they are working to program a large discretionary grant for this. It was a much needed project for airfields, capacity, and safety. No surprise, we're a beach landowner. We're experiencing erosion on the south shore. We're relocating part of our perimeter fence. We're holding $1 million for that. We have some tank painting to accomplish at the fuel farm. A consolidated project for a truck replacement, repainting the parking lot, and replacing our luggage carts for $110,000. We're replacing an aging electro tug. We use that to move the largest of our corporate aviation aircraft. It can also move a JetBlue E190 or A220. And then our final project, we have ARF tools, equipment, and PFAS decontamination. Looking ahead a couple of years when JetBlue puts in the new service on the Airbus A220, we will be required to have a higher ARF capacity on hand. And we need to buy the actual tools and equipment, heavy rescue, hoses, ladders that we put on the truck. They don't come with the truck. And at that time, we are anticipating that the fluorine-free foam will be certificated by the FAA for use. So we're holding money to perform a full decontamination of our existing ARF truck before we take delivery of it. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noah. We appreciate your calling in. The next item is review of proposed fiscal 2024 capital projects, funding sources, and free cash allocation recommendations. So this is around the time of year when the finance director and I start trying to come up with recommendations for what it says here, allocating free cash and how some of our, how the capital projects are going to be funded, the proposed projects. Now, at your meeting next week, you will have a review of the capital program committee's report on fiscal 24 projects, but because of the timing, we need to get this sort of in the pipeline and settled so that we can get information into the warrant. So Brian is going to take us through a brief presentation.
Thank you, Libby. So as mentioned, we'll be taking you through what the recommendations will look like in the report that you'll be able to review more in depth next week from the capital program committee. First is Millie's Bridge, structural sustainability and access. Recommended funding is $1 million. We are recommending that funding source be come from free cash. DPW facilities had a request for security cameras and lighting, which was recommended at $70,000, and we are including that in a potential capital exclusion. DPW transportation, replacement of the DPW fuel tank for $375,000, capital exclusion, recommended funding source. Sidewalk improvement plan, which is a continuation of the plan that's been ongoing for the last 3 to 4 years, excuse me. $1,125,000, continuing with the borrowing for that project. Island-wide road improvements, we're recommending $2 million be authorized from free cash for that. Multi-use path maintenance, $1 million from free cash. Cobblestone improvements, $550,000 recommendation coming from free cash. Winnet Road multi-use path, this is supplemental funding, $4,600,100. This would be a standalone borrowing article on the warrant. Surfside area roads reconstruction, this is supplemental funding to previously allocated monies, 13 million. Recommended that it's a standalone warrant article with a accompanying ballot debt exclusion ballot question. For the fire department, the recommendation for trench and technical rescue equipment and $375,000 would be included in capital exclusion. Engine one replacement, $850,000, we would recommend a borrowing. Fire department staff vehicle, $80,000, be part of the capital exclusion as well. It's a recommended funding source. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jerica? Comet Pond dredging, $4 million standalone borrowing article. Harbor plan implementation, year 3, $100,000 appropriated from free cash. IT, continuation of the maintain the network infrastructure that we currently have, $50,000 from free cash. Replace town computers consistent with the year-over-year recommendation and allocations. This year, $69,000 coming from free cash. Marine Department had one request, the town pier floating dock replacements. This is supplemental funding. As you're aware, we did award the majority of the project, but some of the alternates and this do need supplemental funding in the amount of $2,580,000. This is proposed as a standalone warrant article with an accompanying ballot question. It would be a debt exclusion. Natural Resources requested $500,000 from for a baseline environmental data program. We're recommending that come from the tax levy and other general revenues. And then Pulpus and Nantucket Harbors permitting, planning, and dredging. $555,000 to come from free cash. Public Works had a request for Nobodier soccer field addition and expansion. I believe this is for one additional field, $3,800,000 recommended as a debt exclusion and a standalone warrant article. Next slide. Thank you. School department requested $350,000 for IT infrastructure. We're recommending that be funded through the tax levy and other general revenues. Grounds equipment of $70,000 we're recommending be part of the capital exclusion. Continuation of their building improvement program, $350,000 from tax levy and other general revenues. And then 24 Surfside Road property upgrades. We're recommending free cash, but we are looking at potential other alternatives for that. And one note, I do want to note the tax levy and other general revenues is as per the town code of raising 1% of the real and personal property tax collections from the prior year, as well as 1% of the local estimated receipts received from the prior year. Solid waste, the landfill closure phase 1, this is supplemental funding. We have allocated and appropriated a borrowing authorization with a debt exclusion for $14 million. The costs now have risen to a projected $19 million. So we need a $5 million supplemental funding authorization that will be a debt exclusion in the standalone article. Town administration had 3 projects that we've recommended and Capcom has concurred. Continuation of the townwide document management system to put all of the records online, $500,000 recommended funding sources free cash. Continuation of the coastal resiliency planning effort, $1 million appropriated from free cash. And then additional EV charging stations throughout the town, $100,000. That funding source is recommended as free cash. Total for the general fund, $45,699,100. And next slide, please, Erica. This breaks down, there's $1,200,000 from tax and other revenues. Free cash is $8,574,000. Capital exclusion would be $970,000. Debt exclusion would be $24,380,000. Borrowings inside the levy limit would be $10,575,000, and those would be worked into future operating budgets, most likely at least 2 fiscal years out before we would plan to put those in. For the recommended funding source in the general fund of $45,699,100. Before I go to the enterprise fund, is there any questions from the board, or would you just like me to go all the way through?
Yep, one question.
Brian, this may be better for the Capcom next week, but I'm curious about the timing of the Wawinet bike path funding in terms of we've just moving ahead with the planning phase of that. Is there a reason that's necessary to have on this year's warrant as opposed to holding that for another year?
I believe, and I think the town manager may correct me if I have this wrong, or maybe Rick if he's on the line, but it's my understanding that we would need to have that authorization and the funding in to leverage the potential grant for some of those construction costs, which would be consistent with how we've appropriated for other projects. If it were not to move forward at a future meeting, we would simply rescind the borrowing authorization.
Okay, thank you.
Enterprise fund, which the airport manager did take you through, they have $43,090,500 in recommended capital funding, consistent with the way that we have managed their authorizations. All of them are borrowing requests, and I'll use as an example paint and beads and rubber markings removal. In a subsequent year, when the project is completed, they typically will use retained earnings to pay down the smaller projects, but for cash flow purposes, they do borrowings and then use retained earnings subsequent to that to pay the borrowings back. Our Island Home, a replacement van purchase in the amount of $197,000. The recommended funding source will be retained earnings. Sewer, which the sewer director very ably took you through today. The first two would be borrowing the capacity management operations and maintenance program. $2 million would be a borrowing. Surfside wastewater treatment facility, $7 million of supplemental funding is a borrowing. I will note that that is on the intended use plan, so that would qualify for state revolving fund money. And then 3 additional requests for a replacement dump truck, a new F-350 pickup, and replacement of the utility truck. $115,000, $85,000, and $200,000 would all come from retained earnings. Solid waste, we would propose the purchase of a third baler at the MRF facility, $380,000 coming from free cash. Purchase of a second scale for the transfer station, not only for redundancy, but potentially to be able to use during periods of high volume, $210,000 from free cash. And then phase 2 of the paving and stormwater improvements at the facility, $500,000 from free cash. The Nantucket water, which Mark did take you through earlier, I would just note that all of these projects are going to be recommended as a borrowing. However, the employee housing in the pipe and equipment storage building would be anticipated to use retained earnings in subsequent years to pay down ratably a portion of those borrowing costs, so that there's actually no long-term debt associated with those. But we don't feel it's appropriate to just wipe out potentially half of their retained earnings in 1 year. So we would look at a ratable reduction in payment of the bands to accomplish those projects, but authorize the borrowings today so they could begin them as soon as possible. And then stormwater, which the sewer director did also touch on, Silver Street parking lot improvements, design and construction. This is on the list. We most likely will be funding this through an alternate source, which would have ultimately come out of the general fund, but we're looking at potentially using some of the force main project and have the general fund pay the debt service related to that to be able to accomplish this in a little bit quicker time frame. Island-wide drainage improvements, $1,100,000 will be a borrowing recommendation. And then the implementation of the capacity management operation and maintenance plan, much like we have in sewer and has been highly successful in sewer, $2 million, which would also be a borrowing. Total for the enterprise fund recommendations of $63,245,000. And this breaks down the use, makes it a little easier for everyone to see. $597,000 total from all enterprise funds for retained earnings. Free cash recommendations of $1,090,000 appropriated for solid waste, and then borrowings of $61,558,000, which is $63,245,000 in recommendation. Is there any questions before we start discussing the preliminary recommendations for free cash by town administration?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we are working extremely hard. DOR has been extremely limited in the amount of overtime. So we've been working with them and pushing them as hard as possible to get free cash and retained earnings certified. We still have reviewed all the documentation submitted, and we still believe that $15,250,000 is where it will end up. We're still recommending the one-time expense increase request for town operations of $1,559,500. The one-time transfer to the Special Education Stabilization Fund from free cash of $250,000, Town and school and enterprise fund capital request, $9,664,000. Unpaid bills still remains at approximately $12,163,000. We have made some additional recommendations to town administration that we're putting forth. We recommend additional funding into the capital stabilization of $1,250,000, recommending an additional $1,250,000 into the other post-employment stabilization fund, which is the fund that would be used to put back any monies paid for any employee leaving who has accrued leave time that we would have to pay out. That liability is extremely substantial, and this would bring us to almost $3 million in that fund, which has been the goal since we started to fund this. And then we're recommending an additional fund, the remaining contribution or fund contribution, excuse me, into the OPEB trust fund of $500,000, which is what we also did last year. We allocate for all of these purposes. The unallocated free cash currently would stand at $764,337. And I'm happy to entertain any questions from the board.
I'm not seeing any
No,
questions.
just it's good to see a couple things going into capital stabilization and post-employment stabilization. I think that's prudent. So I support both of those. A question, Brian, when we start thinking about coastal resiliency, well, that's considered a capital item. So that could be there at this point, correct?
Well, correct. It is in the capital recommendations, and it's as noted as the $1 million, which is consistent with what we funded last year as well, Matt.
Right. Yeah, I just think it's something it's going to come pretty quick. And I think that's something we should be thinking about as well, because we're going to have some big numbers and it's going to be there before you know it. But thank you.
Anybody else?
So I don't know that we necessarily need a vote on this, but is it safe to say the board endorses the recommendations? Okay,
Yes.
because that's going to lead into some warrant information.
Jason, are you good?
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So next is continued review of town-sponsored warrant articles for the 2023 annual town meeting and/or ballot questions. And I'm going to take you through the draft, which was updated on the 16th. I haven't actually updated it since then in the document itself, but I do have some updates to go over with you. So Erica, you just bring up that and I'll just go through it a bit. Okay. So I'm not even quite sure where these things are, but in no particular order, there was an additional article added for sewer district map changes that came from the Plus office and the sewer department. Evidently, it fell through the cracks earlier, and it is several parcels that are in a needs area and are surrounded by sewer district area, but they somehow just haven't gotten into the sewer district. So it's kind of an administrative putting them in, as I understand it. There were two zoning articles that I was advised by Plus to remove today, and I can tell you what they were. We had a real lot going on this week, so it wasn't possible to get everything updated as well as I wanted to, but stand by 1 second. Okay, there were a few updates here. The following two articles need to be deleted based on conversations with property owners. We will pursue those at a future town meeting, and they are, it's hard because we don't have numbers of articles, but it was a zoning map change of RC to CN at 103 Washington Street, and a zoning map change of RC to ROH at 77 Washington Street. So those are coming out. And there were, what is this other thing? There were some map reference corrections in a couple of real estate articles. There were a couple of citizens who suggested some article reordering. One of them had to do with trying to combine some of the so-called government related articles together. So I just went ahead and did that. And the other had to do with a couple of zoning articles to be grouped together that weren't grouped together at this point. And those I haven't done it yet, but I will get to those. And there was just some general minor editing of some warrant articles. And I think that's about it that changed to the warrant since last week. But Erica, if you can go to the very end of the document where the election warrant is, the finance director and I have, there's 2 operating override ballot questions that we need to determine if the board is prepared to proceed with. One is an override for solid waste, which we've actually been referencing in our budget message and documents for the past 2 to 3 years and was in your proposed budget recommendations for fiscal 24 when we reviewed this with you in December. And our understanding is that we are preparing to proceed with that one. The other is an operating override for affordable housing. And this is somewhat in response to the citizen warrant article to dedicate 2/3 of the room occupancy tax to affordable housing. We've had a discussion at the finance committee a week or 2 ago about that. And Brian and I met with the Affordable Housing Trust earlier this week about that. And our recommendation is an override for affordable housing, specifically for it. And there were some concerns expressed, like, for example, operating overrides technically, legally only need to be dedicated for their so-called intended purpose for the first year. However, in our history, since I've ever been here, and Brian as well, all of the operating overrides that we have ever passed have continuously annually been dedicated to their initially intended purpose. And those are 2 solid waste overrides, a mosquito control override, and the override for our island home. So we would anticipate that that would not change for this affordable housing article. Brian, I'm going to look to you to just re-review this concept with the board and discuss maybe the number that we've been talking about. And I think the Affordable Housing Trust is meeting again next week. Brooke may be able to address this a little bit more being a member. But are you meeting next week about it?
We have a special meeting next week, but it's not
On this? Okay.
necessarily. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I think the trust was generally supportive of the override idea. Is that
So I
safe to
think
say?
I would, the way I would word it is that the trust is it was expressed support for the voters having the option to consider the override as an alternative to the citizen warrant article, which is to fund the stabilization fund for affordable housing with the short-term rental. I'm going to say the short-term rental tax or the 2/3 of the room's occupancy tax, which the thinking is that represents the additive amount since we've added the short-term rental tax. There was a lively discussion about one revenue source over another and the perceived advantages, disadvantages, risks at town meeting at the ballot box for each alternative. But the trust definitely supported the voters having the option to have consider both possibilities for a regular revenue stream for affordable housing in the absence of our ability to get anything else through the legislature, et cetera, and the desperate need that we have as a community to really dig into this housing crisis with significant, more additional and significant and consistent funding over time so that we can do more long-term planning. The year by year debt exclusion model has been successful in getting the train on the tracks, I would say, but being able to really think long-term and get more into home ownership opportunities at a substantial level really requires that we have a steady funding stream and which allows us to do some significant borrowing up front so that we can increase the supply of deed restricted homes available to year-rounders and at affordable prices, and attainable prices. So that's kind of the thinking. The trust has not voted to endorse one option over the other at this point in time.
Okay, so as Libby mentioned, we're on the call when the finance committee discussed the citizens warrant article. And there was some question about whether we could find some middle ground to make all of this work, which we took back and internally I discussed with town administration, a thought process that all the discussion has been revolving around $8.5 million, excuse me, as the number that would be 67% of a prior year's, the most recent completed fiscal year's room occupancy tax. So with that in mind, started to try to look at this and say, is there a way to do this without creating extreme stress on the general fund budget and the complete uncertainty that I think would come with budgeting in future years if the article were to pass. So what we proposed and discussed as a framework to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was a $6.5 million override, which in our opinion would give them the stability that we believe is necessary for moving forward. We then proposed that we would annually look at, after we receive the June payment, what the receipts for room occupancy were. We'd multiply it by, in this case, 67%. And that delta between what that 67% of room occupancy was and the override would then be funded through general tax and other revenues, so that we would, to the extent and the best of our ability, get them as close to 8.5 or potentially more, depending on the outcome, as possible on an annual basis. I think it serves the purpose of potentially having revenue come directly from room occupancy, although directly in the budget, money's fungible, so it comes from the entire pot, but it still would serve the purpose of getting them to approximately 8.5 million, which is kind of the landing point that we keep hearing about. And it would have also, I think one of the town administration's main goals is really trying to leverage a stable funding source for the trust to be able to continue to advance its initiatives. And there would be a tremendous amount of uncertainty with the citizen warrant article in what would be available on a year-over-year basis. It would also create tremendous uncertainty for town administration in trying to budget a general fund operational side budget. So this was a framework that we discussed with the trust. Obviously, we wanted to come to before the board and get their feeling on a potential $6.5 million override, and see what get your thoughts on this potential framework of a way to move forward and hopefully put the trust in a position to continue the initiatives.
Yeah, I'll comment. I think we need to fund housing. One of my concerns is, are we prioritizing it properly from the town perspective? And what I mean by that is, it's great to do home occupancy, home ownership and et cetera, and that's great. But if we end up funding a bunch of home ownership, but we don't have any employees to run the town, we haven't helped ourselves. And I almost think, in my own opinion, I think rental housing, till we have a substantial supply, I think rental housing on this property, till we have a substantial supply, would be it could be a priority, because I think sometimes we'd love to have, nice to haves, and you absolutely need to have to run the town. We need to have access to housing for town employees, and really nice housing that any of us would want to live in. And I worry that so anyway, so I guess for Brooke, what are the discussions toward those types of choices? If the town is going to make this type of commitment, what commitment, can the town expect back so that the town has staff?
So two things. First of all, we've been focused on rentals primarily because of Chapter 40B and the framework that's set up, and everything we have in the pipeline to be developed. We're about to issue 3 RFPs for Orange Street, Bartlett Road, and Amelia Drive to start. And, we had budgeted or anticipated costs for, funding for those in the stuff we've asked for to date. And of course, construction overruns, we all know what's happened. So a lot of that money has been absorbed by other projects that are in the pipeline, including Tacoma Green. Hopefully that will come to fruition as well. So we're talking about close to 100 rental units in the pipeline now that on properties that we already own or that are about to go out to RFP. I think what is missing, both from a town employee retention, overall town employee retention, is home ownership opportunities for people who, firefighters and police officers and longtime employees who want to stay and don't see themselves ever being able to own a home. And that is what we have gotten tons of feedback in our efforts that is a huge missing part of what we're doing. They're coming out, in small doses at Sandpiper, the workforce housing. But what this kind of funding allows us to do is front load borrowing in tens of millions of dollars. So we can really do both simultaneously. We don't have to give up the continued development of rental, really great rental housing, both for town employees and for the community at large, and be able to do home ownership opportunities through land leases and deed restrictions, and also stem the tide of the loss of properties that have been traditionally owned by year-round folks who are getting to retirement age. They're departing the island, they're selling, and those homes at the prices they're selling at are not going to turn over to the next teacher or firefighter. So getting in the game on home ownership to stem the tide of loss of traditional year-round properties is also a critical and important priority. So this kind of significant, as I said, funding, we can borrow a lot and move fast on home ownership through the about to be established community land trust, community housing trust. So it's really being able to walk and chew gum at the same time, Matt, to do both. And we wouldn't be abandoning rental. We still have the property at Vesper Lane that will get developed, and there'll be other opportunities, I'm sure, that will come along for rental.
Again, I agree with all that. My concern is what is the priority? I want the town to be able to operate, and I worry that I think there could be a backlash if all this housing goes to bakers, and sandwich shop people. There could be a backlash from, just to pick on my own industry, my own business. There could be a backlash. I think the town has to really take care of itself. And I hope that somehow we find out how to do that, or we aren't going to, what did we hear earlier today? 190 units, 190 water connections. We're going to be buried. I don't know how we're going to, as a community, I don't know how we're going to keep up with it if we don't have staff. I don't know how the demand that's being placed, on this island right now is off the charts, as we all know that.
Yeah.
And I just, so I just hope that we are really focusing on that. So
the RFPs that are going out are taking advantage of DHCD's municipal employee preference as part of them as well. So in that lottery system, there's an ability to preference municipal employees in those developments. So, we're using every tool we can to try to balance that. And of course, we're working, Tucker and the housing office and are working with town administration on the development of town-owned properties on Tacoma Way for employee housing, and how do we move forward with that? And there's no reason why we can't marry this funding with, we've talked about how maybe to marry affordable housing trust funding with town employee housing as well. So
we were working on, and this will be the last one because we could go on all night, but Matt McCarrican was going to do a site plans here at some point. Has that ever happened? And can you forward those to me?
We have not met with him yet. We have a
Okay.
meeting with him scheduled later this month.
Okay.
And we don't have plans yet. We're just talking concepts at this
Yeah,
point.
concept plan, yeah.
But yeah, whatever we come up with.
I
sure.
think Park Circle, from density standpoint and usable green space, I think Park Circle is a great example. It's green space, but it's usable. They've got a bunch in the middle. The parking is assigned great, and there's a lot of, you get a lot of bang for your buck in that area. And people who live there, I know some people have started there and have moved on to other houses. It's been a great thing for them. So we should be thinking that way here. not, and I'm just thinking about this because I was talking to someone about it today, in not a suburban pattern with 3 houses on a 10,000 square feet. You know, we should be thinking about how can we put density in this entire area, including the parking lots. You know, if we want to get enough housing, we're going to have to start making things look like downtown in certain spots. And I hope we don't lose the opportunity to do that out here. So anyway.
Was that everything?
My only other question was, there's a bunch of articles that'll impact short-term rentals. Are those going to all be put in the same general area?
I think those are the zoning articles that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, so if those are, because I think once we know where they are, I think before we adopt this, we should talk about them. And I think it needs a comment from us. You know, if we're waiting on all those articles, we should be strongly urging people to pass them over. You know, we shouldn't be picking and choosing winners and losers if we've all said we wouldn't do that. So I think it's really important that some of them are sort of, oh, it's cleanup. Well, it's not cleanup. So let's call some of them what they are.
If I could ask a process question, the warrant gets adopted and at what point do we comment? Is it
So-
before that or after?
Later.
No,
Sometime
it's
later.
once we have finance committee and planning board motions.
Okay.
Which will be mid-March-ish. And in fact, right now, just looking ahead a bit to next steps, you adopt this next week. The warrant is published in the paper the following week. The FinCom has a public hearing on warrant articles. I think it's for February 6th. February 6th. And then even prior to that, they're going to start reviewing more. They're already reviewing citizen articles and they're going to start reviewing town articles next week and the following week, like the week of the 30th. And they will adopt, their last day to adopt motions is March 14th. There's a joint select board, FinCom, planning board meeting regarding the FinCom and planning board motions on Monday, March 20th at 4 p.m. This is all in a timeline that's online that you adopted in August. You have preliminary review of your comments and or recommendations to warrant articles and or motions on March 22nd. You have another opportunity for that on March 29th. And then we need to get the warrant to the printer.
So there will, excuse me, there will be comments in the official printed warrant about select board's opinions.
Once those comments will be in the booklet that goes to town meeting.
As long as we make our comments in time.
Right.
Sometimes we're at the last minute and we're struggling, and
Yes, but
that's why I keep bringing it up.
that's why you keep bringing it up. And that is why I built in 2 times for you.
Do we have a meeting on March 29th? That's the 5th. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
No.
Okay.
So we may have to
Do it the 22nd.
well, you already have it on the 22nd. We may have to move you up to the 15th. Although the FinCom's finishing their motions on the 14th, but I mean, you're going to know what they're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'll have to revise this a bit.
Okay.
So with respect to the warrant then, I think what we would like to understand from you all is, do you endorse the overrides? And the affordable housing override will also require a standalone warrant article, which has been drafted. It's not in there yet, but it will get into there. And at what number are we talking about for the affordable housing override? Brian, you recommended what number? 6.5? 6.5?
I recommended 6.5 million. That's correct, based on the discussion yesterday and based on trying to find middle ground to get to a roughly $8.5 million number without putting too much more additional stress on the general fund itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good option to put out there. And I like the way it functions better than a stabilization fund. I think the stabilization fund is more cumbersome. I mean, I am assuming that it will have the same parameters that over a certain threshold that the
100,000.
select board
have to
would
be
be
approval, yeah.
voting on it
Yeah.
as in addition to the trust fund. So there's a good kind of check and balance there.
Yeah, I support it as long as we make a comment against the other and say we're doing this instead of this. I think that's important. I also think we have to be thinking about, all of a sudden, we're gonna go from 40 something million and 40 here and 40 at the airport, and we're gonna go, into the 100 million thing. If there's anything we can pare down that can be done in the fall or done next spring, we really should be thinking about that. I know we talked about Willamette earlier, but because I think at some point there's gonna be some pushback against some of, these amounts of overrides. And I would hate it to be pushed back against the housing stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, or solid waste.
Yeah,
Because that's
exactly.
going to be a big problem. How many ballot questions are we looking at now?
Could you please go back to the end of the warrant? I think it's 7. So
Seven,
looking at here,
okay.
we've.
Sorry, I just didn't have it in front of me anymore.
7 with the 2 overrides.
So we should think about if we're comfortable with 7. Two.
And what's the total amount of all those questions?
Well, can you go back to
Just rough? It's
roughly, Brian, can you do that in your head?
12.
Well, you get 13 million. Can you go down, Erica?
wow.
13 million, that's 18. 4.6 is 22.6. 3.8 is 26.4. Roughly $1 million is 27.4. And then 6.5 and 3.7 is 10.2. So about 34 million, I think it is, or 36 million roughly.
I mean, to me, 36 million at a time where where the economy may be tanking kind of bothers me. I can't tell you which of those items I'd take out, but I'm not sure we're going to get the town to approve that much money.
I'm curious about the history of the playing field. If someone,
Well, can you go up to that one, Erica?
It's
While we're
part of the
looking, the other-
parks master
It-
plan,
right.
and it's the fields out there are very heavily used.
yeah, and
Um,
I'm just asking because I don't know, as a relatively new member, where
And we
that
did some
process is.
land swap with the land bank to
Okay.
acquire the space for it.
It's largely about usage, and grass fields have to rest quite a bit, and it restricts.
And there's a maintenance issue that Libby asked Libby about a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago, that they're improving. There was, there wasn't water going on some of them, and there's some things like that once those are straightened out, it'll be a lot better out there as well. So.
Yeah, I think the playing field's actually one of the easiest cells on here.
Yeah.
And I think it ties right back to our quality of life goal.
Yeah, but what last year we had, there were a couple things that surprised me that didn't pass. What was it?
It was the central municipal facility. That was the only
That was
one.
the
We
big
had,
one.
we had numerous ballot questions, and that
Right.
was the only one.
That's right.
I mean, that's why I asked the question about the Willamette bike path, because it feels as though that's just in the initial stages. And I realize that there's potential grant funding that we can seek if we have the authorization. And while I don't want to leave that on the table, that to me feels like the lowest priority on this list in terms of timeline. I realize a lot of people have been anticipating it, but if the voters are choosing between, a bike path and housing, like, does it make sense for us to delay that choice as one option? I don't know.
Well, our strategic priority is
Housing.
housing. And I'm sorry, that's just too much money. I can't tell you what I would cut today, but it's too much money.
Yeah, I don't really want to take any of them off because I think that bike paths are part of our transportation goals too.
If we want to attempt to reduce ballot questions, typically the capital exclusions pass because that only increases taxes for 1 year. But Brian and I have discussed the possibility of reducing the appropriations to the stabilization funds in order to fund the capital exclusion items from free cash, which would eliminate one ballot question with several items on it. I don't know how you all feel about that. Would that be something you'd want to
That's the
consider?
970,000.
Yep.
I don't think that, I mean,
Yeah. It's relatively.
I don't think that's
still
making the
small.
difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I do worry that 7 questions is a lot and you just kind of lose people when they're at the ballot box, but I mean, I think that this is the kind of money we're going to be looking at. We're going to if we're going for the island home funding next year, it's going to be a lot more than this.
We're probably going with the construction for Island Home in 2025 annual town meeting, but just for comparison, at last year's town meeting, we had 12 ballot questions. One was a charter amendment, one was a capital outlay, and the remaining 10 were debt exclusions. Just as comparison.
Right, so
And we also have Baxter Road coming someday.
True.
Our island home.
Yep. Senior Center.
I mean, I'm not sure that, oh, well, I'd have to go with a pencil line by line.
Well, you have a week to think about it. So we'll put this together in final draft as discussed tonight with 6.5 million for the housing override and see where we're at next week. If that sounds okay.
So sharpen your pencil, Malcolm, this week.
I'm the son of a Scotsman who was a banker.
okay, are we good on that? Yep. Next up, select boards reports. We have a review of the strategic plan update.
So there are, okay, back up a little bit. Thinking back on November 29th, you all had a strategic planning session that was facilitated by Julian Novak of Raftellus. And one of the documents in your packet just kind of reviews what occurred at the workshop meeting. And the other is more of an updated document for you to review, which is redlined to show you what would be changing if we go with what your discussion points were. Janet Schulte, our strategic plan advisor, is online. If Janet, do you want to add anything to that?
No, one of them is a comparison between what was presented and what was changed, and the other one is a report of the meeting. So that's all I have to clarify.
Oh, yes, you're right. So maybe the report of the meeting, I don't know if you want to go through that. Hopefully people have been able to read it through a little bit. We might want to go through the comparison document a little bit. And so you can see what would, if you adopt, ultimately, it doesn't have to be tonight, a new strategic plan or an updated strategic plan. These things are the proposed language. Is that right, Janet? Or not?
Yes, the comparison document shows how much we removed from the document because things had already been done, which shows that this is a really vibrant, living strategic plan, that it really does shape the work of town departments and getting things done. So I think that's the seminal document here for looking at that. And then the other one is a report of what actually is the final report of what actually happened.
So one of the pieces of this around housing that's important is introducing the idea of homeownership because the new community housing trust is applying for its nonprofit status under a provision that is called lessening the burdens of government. And so if it's a priority of ours, the public-private partnerships in the homeownership space, it supports their application for, which allows them to operate in this unique framework of the 501c3 legislation or law. So that piece that we talked about toward the end of the meeting, I think is really important. And the adoption of these changes is important on a timing basis for their active process of seeking that nonprofit status. So that would be a reason to encourage us to move forward with adopting this sooner rather than later.
And that changes the
definitely.
240%. Is that the?
Yes,
AMI, is
it's
that the
that,
main
but
one?
it's also Tucker, if Tucker's on, I'm a little tired and I'm hoping that he can help me explain what the language changes that's critical to that process.
He went over it when we did the strategic plan.
Yeah,
but
but I-
relatively briefly. It was towards the end.
Yeah.
I did notice there's a typo, DHDC instead of DHCD. It's under new activities, second section. Department of Housing Community Development. The abbreviation's just wrong. Oh, Tucker, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's helpful, but yes, with respect to the ability of the Community Land Trust to, in effect, assist the town in what the IRS would call lessening the burdens of government, including this language in the strategic plan would, as Ms. Moore said, aid in the application and approval process with regard to the IRS.
And I think it's the goal through a variety of approaches, promote affordable and attainable home ownership opportunities for the year-round community, which will meet the housing needs at all income levels and lessen the burdens of government. That's what I was looking for in here. And that's on page 195 of our packet. It's the proposed change.
Yeah, I'm fine with that wordage.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That section.
So maybe we go through this. Erica, can you just go to the beginning of that document that's up? Thank you. Okay, so the first focus area is housing. And the previous text is shown in red, and it would be, Janet, just correct me if I'm wrong, the updated language would be what's shown right above that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the activities associated with that goal, which are shown in the, just sort of scroll down a bit, and that are associated with that goal are shown there. And then the next one, just go down a bit. Yep. The highlighted language is new as a result of your workshop discussion. And so on through this particular focus area. Is 200% AMI correct?
No, the amended language goes to 240, the black language above.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, got it. Yep.
Black text.
Right.
That,
Okay.
that is corrected.
So these columns just explain,
Mhm.
what the original was and what the modified would be. And then we get into transportation. The focus area and the goal remain the same for that first goal there, except there's a bit of an activities update. Based on your discussion, we deprioritized the evaluation of paid parking regulations and the paid parking program implementation until we have a dedicated position to that, which we do not have just yet. And now, of course, our transportation planner is leaving. And then we get into the sidewalk route connection, which the goal stays, the activities are being modified.
Have we agreed to put together a parking commission once we get a parking coordinator?
Yes.
Maybe that should be on here. So we're not just anyway,
Yeah,
once we hire, because I think that's a step. We don't want to be,
Yeah.
if we're de-emphasize it, be deprioritizing it, I think we want to get the other steps in place. So when we put it in place, it actually gets done this time.
Yep.
So,
That's a good point. We'll add established parking commission and under new activities. Yep.
and that's partly self-preservation, because there's no way this committee is going to be able to do it. And there's a lot of work that has to be done to do this right.
You mean we can't do it?
Yeah, well, a parking commission, there's so much work to monitor and do it properly. I think that's not something that could be handled at this level.
Well, and I think the other advantage to getting the parking commission established is we've collected all this data, and to have somebody analyze it so that if we decide to move forward with paid parking, we can explain to the community what the data showed us to support that it's a good idea.
So the next goal was the sidewalk route completion, connection from Mid-Island to the ferries. And some of that work has been removed because it's completed. Others will remain on there because it is not completed yet. The goal about shifting the mode of choice of commuters, that needs some dedicated resources, but we do have some new activities on there, which you talked about. Environmental leadership. Focus area stays the same, goal stays the same, but we did a lot of updating of new activities to make it much more detailed. Some stuff was removed because it's been completed.
Yeah, and a lot of the solid waste stuff really is part of this analysis of operations at the landfill, and the long-term planning, so.
Yep, definitely. The goal of, is that Austin? Okay, the goal just above that one, finalize island-wide long-term water quality management plan. The natural resources director has prepared this plan. It's just pending getting on your agenda. So we had some correspondence about this earlier in the week, and I think we settled on a date in February. So hopefully that will be coming to you very shortly. There are some emerging needs in association with the environmental leadership focus area, which relate to green communities and that supply chain study with the vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
That's ongoing. Efficient town operations focus area, develop a facilities master plan. That has actually been done. And now it's time to start filling it out with concession master plan, parks, and these things have largely been, they're either in the works or have been almost completed or haven't quite started yet, but are just about to. All of these are pretty active. Investing in technology, if you recall, we deprioritized some of the activities associated with that, which related to seeing if we could get public Wi-Fi in certain areas of the island. And we kept some of those other activities and or revised them a bit. And then under that efficient town operations focus area, we had these emerging needs of evaluating Nantucket's form of government. You all had a lot of discussion about that. And I think at this point, we're seeing what happens at town meeting and then taking up some kind of committee group. Develop communications plan. We're very actively working on that. Expand hiring and retention efforts. And that is definitely a high focus in town admin. Janet, jump in if you want to elaborate on anything. The quality of life focus area has the same goal, a few new or updated activities as shown. The other goal, well, there's a couple of goals there, and both of them have some modified or updated activities.
I do think this document reflects a great deal of work that's going on in town departments to implement the goals of the select board strategic plan. And the fact that we can take some things off because they've been done shows real progress. It's an impressive activity.
So if you all feel good about those changes, what we would do next, I think, is put it together into a final draft to put before you at a future meeting in the near future to adopt. Does that sound about what we talked about, Janet?
Yes.
Jason?
Actually, they could adopt that report that Ref Tellis gave us. The first document summarizes everything that's in the document that you just went through. You could adopt it tonight if you're ready to.
Oh, because that has what I just said in it.
Right. It's a summary of everything that they have. It's a summary of everything that was on that comparison document is in that document as a report. And that would be the basis for our next update when we meet again to discuss the strategic plan.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable.
I'm happy with it, and I love how it's evolving. I think that it's how we originally laid it out to be a working document that doesn't just sit on a shelf. And
If we add parking commission, I move to adopt.
And I'd second that.
okay. Any other comments on the motion? All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously with that one addition.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you very much.
I do want to thank Janet. She really kept this thing going. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
absolutely.
My pleasure.
And also the assistant town managers and everybody else involved, because it is a huge amount of work. Yeah.
Are there any other committee reports this evening? Okay, is there a motion
Just,
to?
well,
oh,
just
One,
oh, you want to go? Malcolm?
I was just wondering, I know elevator staff have nothing to do, but I was wondering if next week it could sort of ask the department heads to, of all their requests, what is absolutely necessary and what's nice to have of all their budget requests. Is that possible? If they just take 5 minutes and look at it and say, we absolutely have to have this, or this would be a nice to have.
Do you mean all town departments?
Well,
Like, and do you mean?
It was
their-
part of the process. They've sort of ranked it. That's,
Yeah, we
but it
did
wasn't
rank
that
them.
clear what was absolutely necessary versus what would be nice.
So do you mean the expense increase requests of those lists of items?
Yeah, that list of items.
Okay, I don't know if we're going to be able to put that together by next week,
Well, whatever.
but I can,
It would just help
we
me.
can work on it, sure.
Matt?
yeah, just one of the things I did bring up at the last coastal resiliency meeting was I asked that group to put a discussion of Baxter Road and what would be the right thing to do there onto a future meeting. I hope we do. We're waiting to see, because I'm trying to think of what is in. Have we had any luck setting up a meeting with Concom? Has that been, I haven't heard anything.
No, you haven't. I have not gotten to that myself. I did initiate email this afternoon with the sustainability program manager and the natural resources director about trying to come up with some dates that we can all start sharing as to what would work for both boards, and hopefully the Concom will be in agreement.
So I attended the Concom meeting last week and really got a sense that there was a willingness to sit down and talk, because this is a major reset button. Really, it changes who's at the table, who ultimately will be responsible, and what's going to happen. And I think the opportunity to sort of put everything on the table again and just talk about what's possible is going to be really important. So I was pleased that many of the commissioners in the Concom seemed open to that shared dialogue. So I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yeah, my sense is the biggest loss, if we continue down this path, the biggest loss we will have is the policy that was driving this. We had a policy that was the people gaining the benefit would be paying the majority of it, and that we would look at this from a macro perspective from the entire area and do a plan that would work for the entire area. And I think, if it goes the way it's sort of headed now, we'll be doing this lot by lot, and it's not really possible to do coastal resiliency for a neighborhood lot by lot. It doesn't make any sense. And so, that though, other than some of the other losses of, that were there, I think that's my concern, is that if we can't figure out how to, as a town, how to work on the big picture of coastal resiliency everywhere, starting there, but everywhere, then, and they're going to do it lot by lot, it's not going to be very effective. And so I hope that we find a way to, say, okay, what is acceptable? How do we do it? How do we keep it at that, at that macro level? And so anyway, that's why I'm checking in, and, either is it through
we need
coastal
to get that
resiliency, is it through
scheduled.
Concom? We want to stay on this because the easy thing would be, oh, well, nothing we can do. That would be the easiest thing, is just say, well, but the easy thing isn't necessarily the right thing to do. And so I hope we can meet.
And there is urgency to that because there's a removal order in place.
Right.
So
Okay. Understood. Is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Matt Fee,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.